Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Welcome to another episode of Things We Have to Discuss, a place where we enlighten, encourage, and edify.
Welcome to another show. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. I was having a discussion with a friend of mine from Liberia. Everyone knows what Liberia is at. It's on the continent of Africa. But it's really not the continent. Biblically, it's referred to as the land of Cush, Egypt, or Ethiopia. Africa was a name given to it by a Greek general. But it's still today's Liberia. So we was talking about how African Americans are viewed in this country, and the current state of the economy, etc. And he was candid about, was open about how he thought African Americans were viewed. He said, of course, he was like, African Americans are viewed as lazy, criminals, and a lot of other negative terms or whatever. I didn't really pay much attention to it, and I'm like, yeah, they look at us in that manner because, they want to lower our population. They want to smear us with negative stuff, even though the country was built on the backs of our ancestors, which is very true, and they're benefiting from it to this very day. I said that they called us criminals and lazy and all these other negative terms, but did they tell you about places like the Tuskegee study, things like that? Did they tell you about that? It's like, well, Tuskegee study, what is that? And I'm like, it's a study where they told African Americans they were vaccinating them and secretly they were injecting them with syphilis. Secretly they were doing that. And of course he didn't know anything about it, of course I urged him to do research. And I also brought up the Tulsa massacre. And of course he knew about that, and I was like, that's a city that we built up. And they came in, they massacred, they killed everybody, and they burned the town down because it was self-sufficient, How could we be lazy, realistically speaking, when we were kidnapped and stolen from another country and brought here to do the work for them? Why would you go get someone that's lazy to do work for you? That doesn't make any sense. Why are we here if we were lazy? We're remnants of a people that built this country. The very sweat and blood and soil from our ancestors. It doesn't make sense for you to get someone lazy to build something for you. It's just like somebody, say for instance, a man who had a good woman who treated her bad, and then when she want to leave, you want to call all kinds of names and say she ain't nothing. It's the same exact thing. But of course I brought up places like Oscarville, Georgia. And Oscarville, Georgia today is referred to as Lake Lanier. Oscarville, Georgia is pretty much, it was a city that 2 African American males were accused of raping a white woman, and they were lynched. Well, the town feared being, killed and lynched, and so they fled, leaving the city Oscarville vacant. So of course later on, whites or Europeans in America and Georgia came and they flooded it, and now they have their beautiful Lake Lanier. That's where a lot of deaths take place, unfortunately. But I brought that up to him as well, bringing that to his, conscience. And I'm like, the truth of the matter is they're hiring black females. They're not hiring males like that. How often do you see African American males in office versus an African American female, realistically speaking? It's divide and conquer tactic. And they're trying to turn everybody and everything against us to make us seem like that we're something less than what we are. But I'm thankful that there is a God in heaven and that he's aware of the injustice in which we're being treated and how we're being smeared. And I also brought up on the topic too that we're 13% of the population of this country. Only 13% today. We will be less tomorrow, but 13%. But yet we're credited for 98% of the crime in this country. 13%. How is that possible when a large portion of America isn't even covered by people of color or black people? But yet somehow, someway, we're depicted as the criminals of this country all the time. Even though we're only 13%, which is like roughly 49 million people. Like I say, portions of America isn't even covered by black people. And if you really break down, do the math, of that 13%, a smaller percentage are the ones that's committing the crime. Yeah, we see the crime in inner cities. Yeah, we see that. You know, we're populated by blacks. But also, too, the game that's being played, the perpetuation of music, all this stuff is done on purpose. This is not just some random situation. Like I said, this is done on purpose. And of course, I told him, of course, be careful when you judge. And of course, he made it known that, yeah, he realized his country, how he's benefiting. And I'm sure he has a high-paying job, well over 6 figures, I'm sure. But he knows that he's on the backs of the African American who actually contribute to it. So be careful of the judgment of those who you pass judgment on. Because, the minute we're out of the picture, it goes to you. Yeah, you're foreign, but they'd much rather an African, a West Indian versus an African American, because we have a stigma of being a remnant of a people who built the country. And mind you, they've been instilled with generations and generations from their grandparents on down about things about blacks and this and blacks and that and blacks. Is it so true? It's general. And if we judge them by the same standard, then they'll feel discriminated against. But yet we get discriminated against every day based upon the color of our skin. And that's wrong, it forces you as a man to drink of Christ's blood and eat of Christ's flesh so you can be an example. Because it benefits them in the future, to see a person seeking to walk in the light of Christ. It's a lot easier to talk the game, and when you got a majority on your side to cover you, versus when you're a minority and the odds are stacked against you. And also too, I made them aware too that they're gatekeepers. Based upon the color of our skin, we don't get in. They're keeping gates, opportunities, jobs. When it comes to ownership of mortgages, things like this, they're gatekeeping. They're playing games. They're keeping the gate. They're not helping. They're trying to keep the gate. So of course he started to pedal back and think about what he was saying, because we're not offered a lot of high-end positions to what he's offered. In the office workspace, that we're a lot more sensitive, because office environments are majority white, and they may be comfortable saying lingo that we're not comfortable with because of how we grew up and the trauma in which we're dealing with. And it's trauma. It is trauma. Trauma when you seeing him, when you're being pulled over by a cop and he's on some rural area. It's trauma. When you're amongst, a large group of Americans. We're Americans too, granted. But it's trauma when when you know how they think and you know what's really going on in their mind and how they really view you and how they were taught. And they were taught this is learned behavior. In some ways, they're just as innocent and coming into the situation that you are, because they're introduced into the stuff, they're born into the stuff, they're taught this stuff. They might not feel this way, but they see it from generations. So there's a lot to work against. It's on them as the individual to take to it or not. There are a lot of good Europeans, who are for the cause. But it made him think when I brought these things up. The Rosewood, even Central Park was a black community that was taken away. Numerous situations about, you can look up to this very day, a woman in North Carolina is fighting for her property because developers want to take it because she's black. And she had to come up with $250,000 to fight the legal battle to keep her property. So, these, you can find tons of stories. It's so many of them, it's too many to hide. Yet you want to demonize us and tell everybody foreign. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications.